I never believed in ghosts. Not really. At least not until I stepped into Blackwood Manor that night. The old house stood at the edge of town, abandoned for decades, its towering silhouette barely visible under the pale moonlight. The wind howled through its broken windows, carrying whispers that seemed too deliberate to be mere drafts. I told myself it was just the house settling, just my imagination running wild. But deep down, something felt wrong. I gripped the old brass handle, its icy touch sending a shiver up my spine. The door creaked open, revealing a vast hallway swallowed in darkness. My flashlight flickered, just for a second, but that moment of darkness felt heavier than it should have. The floor groaned beneath my hesitant steps, dust rising in ghostly swirls as I moved forward. I had come here to prove a point, to debunk the rumors. People in town spoke of voices in the night, shadows that moved without a source, an unseen presence that watched from the corners of your eye. Superstitions, I thought. But standing there, in that suffocating silence, I wasn't so sure anymore. A faint sound echoed through the corridor, a whisper so soft that I almost missed it. My breath hitched. I swung my flashlight toward the source, illuminating a grand staircase leading up into more darkness. The whispering stopped. Hello? My voice sounded small, swallowed by the vast emptiness of the manor. No response, only silence. A silence so unnatural it made my skin crawl. Then, as I took another cautious step, something moved at the top of the stairs. A shadow. It shifted, just enough for me to know it wasn't a trick of the light. I held my breath. The air grew heavier, thick with an unspoken warning. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to leave while I still could. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped forward. The whispering returned, but this time it was closer. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I climbed the staircase, each step groaning under my weight. The shadow had disappeared, but the air remained thick with an eerie stillness. I scanned my surroundings, my flashlight cutting through the darkness in weak, trembling beams. Something felt off, as if the walls themselves were shifting ever so slightly when I wasn't looking. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched into darkness, lined with closed doors. The whispering had stopped, but a lingering unease wrapped around me like a vice. I hesitated before choosing a door at random, the one slightly ajar at the end of the hall. With a deep breath, I pushed it open. The room was small, filled with dust-covered furniture draped in white sheets. A single window let in a sliver of moonlight, illuminating the floating particles in the air. Something about the space felt distorted. I took a cautious step inside, and as I did, the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. My flashlight flickered, the dim glow barely illuminating the room. I reached for the doorknob, twisting desperately, but it wouldn't budge. Panic crept into my chest. Then, in the reflection of a tall, cracked mirror against the far wall, I saw something. A figure, not standing behind me but inside the mirror. A silhouette, dark and motionless, its head tilted slightly as if studying me. My blood turned to ice. Slowly its hand lifted, fingers pressing against the other side of the glass. I stumbled back, hitting a dresser. The flashlight slipped from my grasp, rolling across the floor and casting jagged shadows around the room. The figure in the mirror remained still, but I could feel its eyes boring into me. I reached for the flashlight, my hands trembling. As my fingers brushed against it, the whispering returned, louder this time, urgent, desperate. Then, the mirror cracked. A thin fracture ran from the top corner to the bottom, distorting the reflection. The shadow within remained unchanged. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. I had to get out. Now I turned back to the door and pounded against it. "Let me out!" My voice was barely a whisper compared to the growing whispers that filled the room, circling me, suffocating me. Then, silence. I slowly turned back to the mirror. The figure was gone, but in its place my own reflection stood, staring back at me. Not quite right. My face was pale, my eyes darker than they should have been. And then, my reflection smiled. I did not. A cold chill slithered down my spine as I stared at the mirror, unable to move. My reflection stood frozen, its eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that felt almost predatory. Then, slowly, it took a step forward, but I hadn't moved. My chest tightened as the realization set in. I was no longer in control. The whispers swirled around me, their hushed voices morphing into something more coherent, more menacing. They weren't just whispers anymore. They were words. Join us. Let go. Embrace the unseen. I shook my head, squeezing my eyes shut. No, this isn't real, it's just a trick. But even as I said the words, I didn't believe them. The air was thick, suffocating, pressing against my skin like invisible hands. Then, the room shifted. The walls pulsed as if they were alive, shadows crawling along their surfaces like living entities. The door behind me disappeared, melting into the darkness. Panic surged through me as my reflection in the mirror grinned wider, its lips parting to reveal something unnatural. Rows of jagged teeth that weren't mine. I stumbled back, but there was nowhere to go. The whispers turned to laughter, cold, hollow, and knowing. My reflection tilted its head, then raised its hand. A long, skeletal finger tapped against the glass. Once, twice. Then, it stepped through. A force like icy tendrils wrapped around my throat, pulling me toward the mirror. I clawed at the unseen grip, gasping for breath. My reflection, now fully separated from the glass, loomed over me, its face a twisted mockery of my own. "You don't belong here anymore," it whispered. Darkness swallowed me whole. When I woke up, I wasn't in Blackwood Manor anymore. I was in my own room. The morning sun streamed through the window, birds chirping in the distance. It felt normal. Too normal. But something was wrong. I sat up and turned to the mirror across my room. My reflection was already looking at me, and it was still smiling.